Is it any wonder that as America has waged violence throughout the world, violence has overtaken us in our own nation? It has not come as an invasion. It has come from within. Our bombs, our drones, our armies are incapable of stopping the gun violence on our streets and schools or domestic violence in our homes. I see the same link here as my father and Martin Luther King saw about the Vietnam War. They believed that we could not have warfare abroad without bringing that violence home to our attitudes, to our communities. 60 years ago this month, my uncle, President John F. Kennedy, gave one of the most important speeches in his life and in American history. It was known as the Peace Speech at American University. In that speech, he outlined his vision, not just for peace in our time, but for peace in all times. In commemoration of that speech, I will deliver my first major policy speech of my presidential campaign.
I know that he has, in his spirit, he has a faith in peace. I've sensed that, or I've seen that.
I'm voting for you, Mr. Kennedy! Another Kennedy in the White House!
He understands the profound necessity to change our policy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the light who shines in the darkness of American politics and will lead us to a new day.
Thank you. Waging endless wars abroad, we have neglected the foundation of our own well-being. We have a decaying economic infrastructure. We have a demoralized people and despairing people. We have toxins in our air and our soil and our water. We have deteriorating mental and physical health. These are the wages of war. What will be? What will be the wages of peace?
The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want a war. We do not now expect a war. This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression. We shall be prepared if others wish it. We shall be alert to try to stop it. But we shall also do our part to build a world of peace where the weak are safe and the strong are just.
Let's take up that call from 60 years ago and ask Americans, all of us, to re-examine our attitude. We have been immersed in a foreign policy discourse that is all about adversaries and threats and allies and enemies and domination. We've become addicted to comic book good versus evil narratives that erase complexity and blind us to the legitimate motives and the legitimate cultural and economic concerns and the legitimate security concerns of other peoples and other nations. We have internalized and institutionalized a reflex of violence as the response for any and all crises. Everything becomes a war. War on drugs, war on terror, war on cancer, war on climate change. This way of thinking predisposes us to wage endless wars abroad, wars and coups and bombs and drones and regime change operations and support for paramilitaries and juntas and dictators. None of this has made us safer, and none of it has burnished our leadership or our moral authority. And more importantly, we must ask ourselves, is this really who we are? Is this what we want to be? Is that what Americans' founders envisioned?
I felt like somebody from the heart was telling me this eloquent story that goes back to the 60s, 50s. And as a journalist, covered Iraq, I was in Panama, I've covered the narco wars. I've covered way too many wars for just one generation. So it was like kind of painfully nostalgic to realize that there was a point in American history when we weren't starting wars. And to have a politician today to remind Americans, I think it's really important to remind people of their own history, because it's easy to sum up history as one war after another, when in fact often the wars are the aberration.
I have a sense of clarity and honesty from RFK Jr. and his uncle could very well have been the last president who I felt I could trust to pursue peace.
Yesterday, a shaft of light cut into the darkness. Negotiations were concluded in Moscow on a treaty to ban all nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater.
I spent 12 years back and forth in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. I grew up on the militarism, rah, 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 isn't it great, watching hero movies. If anybody has seen war, it's something that absolutely should be avoided at all costs. And I think it's wonderful that we actually have a candidate who supports that. To think 20 years ago that we would have Republicans and Democrats and independents all on the same page is remarkable, but it needed somebody to bring it together.
Khrushchev, he said, the earth is an ark, and we can't build another one. We need to preserve it. And the question now is, are we willing to do anything like that today? Or are we going to remain stuck in a self-righteous story in which America is categorically good and our opponents are irredeemably evil? That's the example we've set for everybody in the world. No wonder it's been replicated everywhere, between Israel and Iran, between India and Pakistan, between Shia and Sunni, between Jew and Arab, between Hindu and Muslim, left and right, between pro-life and pro-choice, between vax and anti-vax. This tribalistic, us versus them thinking is tearing us apart.
The country is in such turmoil now, almost like back in the '68 when his father was running. I mean, this country is torn apart. We do have people that don't want any wars, and we want peace, and we want love, and we don't want a war machine. We don't want deep suspicions of our government. We all want to, get along and just bring up our kids in a loving, secure country. And I believe that he's been chosen for this time to do this job for this country.
Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic and has good intentions. And I'm not saying that we should ignore the base elements of human nature or the dangers of the world. But if that's all that we see, then we're going to be stuck forever in the mentality of war. And that's where the military-industrial complex wants to keep us. To chart a course for the future of our nation's military and foreign policy, I'll return once again to the words of John F. Kennedy. Too many of us think that peace is impossible.
Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable.
When we take the first step toward peace, we will become once again a true world leader, a moral authority. It doesn't take much, it's just the first step. And people will start looking at America differently, the way they did when my uncle was president. Thank you all very much. This is what people used to do before Roundup. My uncle John F. Kennedy urged Americans to ask not what their country could do for them, but to ask instead what they could do for their country. On September 11th, I'm asking all of those who support my campaign to do their best to participate in a national day of service. I want to start using the momentum of this campaign right now to improve people's lives.
Can we have Go Kennedy!
There we go. All right. Squeeze in together. Get in there. There we go. Yeah.
We all need to think of ways that we can reorient ourselves and start using our talents to repair the world and to heal the big divisions that are separating us.
What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
Every nation has a darker side, and the easiest thing for a politician to do is to appeal to our hatred and our anger and our bigotry and greed and xenophobia and all of the alchemies of demagoguery. My father and my uncle had a vision for America, a vision of racial harmony, of prosperity for all Americans, of peace in the world, and of honest government. Their lives were tragically cut short, and America took a different path. Yet the possibility they foresaw is still alive, the America that almost was, and yet may be. I've been fighting corporate corruption my entire life, but I understand that today, the problem is much larger than a few crooked individuals. The problem is a system that no longer serves the people, and a people who are so divided and so fearful that they are easily ruled. It's time to unlearn the reflexes of fear and blame and find ways to unify ourselves and turn our country around. I won't pretend to you that it will be easy, but I know what it will take. My father said it: love, wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and that's where we need to start. We will scale down the war machine and bring our resources home. We will rebuild our water systems, repair our roads, modernize our railroads, and clean up our environment. We will also clean up government and earn back the people's trust. We will end the secrecy, the censorship, and the surveillance. We will again be a fearless land of liberty.
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it.
We will face honestly the darker parts of our history, the genocide, the racism, not to shame or blame or punish, but to repair as best we can in a spirit of compassion and kindness toward all. I'm inviting all of you to join me to create an America that we can believe in and be proud of again. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm running for President of the United States.
I feel like the whole country needs to know what's going on here. It's bigger than alarming.
This is the worst I've ever seen it.
I witnessed this dystopian nightmare of this uncontrolled flow of desperate humanity crossing the border and converging here because of misbegotten policies by high leadership of the United States.
When President Biden took office, he signed some executive orders that basically halted all wall construction. It put our agents at risk, it put the migrants at risk, it incentivized the profit making for the smugglers.
At the end of the day, this is a business. Billions and billions of dollars every month are earned from transporting people across into the United States.
These kids are being exploited all along this track. There's nothing humane about any of this.
In this room, obviously, we designed it to be as comfortable as we can possibly make it, because the reality is no child should ever have to come to this exam room.
Señora y mi hija están conmigo. Pero mi hija de 18 años, no sé dónde está.
We see a lot of violence as people are making across the border through Mexico or their countries. We see that devastation in the human lives.
What happens if the family doesn't have the money to buy the plane ticket?
Well, FEMA reimburses us. We can buy that ticket and
so you buy the ticket for
yes.
They were told they could get a bite at the American dream here, and that dream becomes a nightmare along the journey.